This parking spot now belongs to the HOA, and as board chair, I'm authorizing myself to use it. Jerome Carter didn't raise his voice. He didn't step closer. He simply looked at the woman standing between him and his black SUV and said, "That space is deeded to my condo." Imagine finally settling into a luxury downtown complex after years of discipline, sacrifice, and silence. You follow every rule, file every form, keep your head down, only to realize one person believes your success is a community resource the moment it inconveniences them. That was the mistake Melissa Grant made with Jerome Carter. Quick question before we continue. Have you ever had an HOA or neighbor overstep like this? Drop a yes or a no in the comments and tell us where you're watching from. Jerome Carter moved into Harbor Point residences without fanfare. No welcome party, no loud introductions. His move-in happened on a Tuesday morning while most residents were at work. He signed the documents weeks earlier, reviewed bylaws line by line, and made sure everything, from his unit to his 2 assigned parking spaces, was confirmed in writing. Melissa Grant moved in the same week. Everyone knew it. She told them. She introduced herself to the front desk, the maintenance crew, the security guard, and half the building before her furniture arrived. She laughed loudly, asked personal questions, and made sure people knew she'd served on boards before. She didn't say HOA at first. She let people ask. Jerome noticed her the first time when she commented on his car. "That's a nice SUV," she said, standing too close as he parked. "You must travel a lot." Jerome nodded politely, locked his door, walked away. A week later, Melissa became chair of the Harbor Point HOA board. The previous chair stepped down. No one asked why. Melissa announced the change with printed flyers taped in the elevator and an email labeled "Important Community Update" sent at 6:12 a.m. The emails became frequent, too frequent. They covered noise, trash, balcony furniture, hallway decor, then parking. Melissa began emphasizing shared access and flexibility. She floated the idea that some residents had unused resources others could benefit from. She never named Jerome directly. She didn't have to. Everyone knew whose SUV occupied the corner space closest to the elevator. Jerome's space, deeded, assigned, paid for. The first time she asked to use it, she smiled. "Just for an hour," she said. "My guest is elderly." Jerome agreed. The second time, she didn't ask. She left a note on his windshield. "Borrowed HOA space. Thanks for understanding." Jerome said nothing. The third time, he came home to find her car already parked there, hazard lights blinking like permission. When he knocked on her door, Melissa answered casually, holding a glass of wine. "Oh, I figured it was fine. You're barely home anyway." That was when Jerome corrected her, calmly, clearly. He explained the space was private, deeded, and that he'd allowed it before out of courtesy, not obligation. Her smile thinned. The next morning, a warning notice appeared on Jerome's door. "Parking violation, subject to review." Jerome emailed the HOA with documentation, deeds, maps, legal language, clear, professional. Melissa replied 3 days later, "This will be handled internally." From that point on, she stopped pretending. She spoke louder in common areas, mentioned entitlement in meetings, suggested some residents didn't respect community leadership. Jerome didn't attend meetings. He didn't argue. He parked exactly where his deed allowed and went about his life. That restraint irritated her. Then came the morning that changed everything. Jerome was loading his trunk when Melissa's white sedan pulled in fast, blocking his path. She stepped out, heels sharp against concrete, phone already recording. "You've been warned," she said loudly. "This space is under HOA control now." Jerome closed his trunk slowly. "No, it isn't." Melissa smiled, not with relief, but with anticipation. She raised her phone higher. "Then you're refusing HOA authority," she said loudly, "and I'll handle this properly." She turned away and made a call she clearly rehearsed. Less than 5 minutes later, 2 men arrived wearing navy jackets labeled Harbor Point Compliance Unit. Not police, not security, something in between, something fake enough to sound real. Melissa folded her arms. This was the moment she'd been waiting for. What she didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that Jerome Carter had already stopped playing defense a long time ago. And before this driveway confrontation ended, the entire building would learn the difference between borrowed authority and real power.
The two men stepped out of the compliance van like actors hitting their marks, jackets zipped, radios clipped. One of them adjusted his collar as if that alone made him official. Melissa Grant stood just behind them, chin lifted, phone still recording, confidence glowing like she'd already won. "All right, sir," the taller man said, voice practiced but hollow. "Step away from the vehicle. You're in violation of HOA compliance and subject to enforcement." Jerome Carter didn't argue. He didn't explain. He didn't even look surprised. He reached into his jacket slowly, slow enough that both men stiffened, hands twitching near their belts. Melissa's smile widened, sensing drama. But Jerome didn't pull out a weapon. He pulled out a slim leather wallet, flipped it open, and held it at chest level. "I'm Jerome Carter," he said calmly, "Director of Internal Affairs, State Public Safety Division." The words landed before the badge registered. The taller man leaned in slightly, eyes narrowing, then widening. The second man stopped breathing altogether. The seal, the serial number, the photograph. Real. Federal adjacent, real. Melissa laughed sharply. "That's not funny," she said. "You can't just show fake badges. That's illegal." Jerome didn't look at her. He closed the wallet, slipped it back into his jacket, and then did something that changed the temperature of the entire car parking garage. He raised his phone and tapped one button. "This is Director Carter," he said evenly. "I'm requesting immediate response units. I have 2 individuals impersonating enforcement officers under false HOA authority. Location is Harbor Point Residences, garage level 1. He paused, eyes steady. "Yes, I'll hold." The silence that followed was different, heavy. The fake compliance officers exchanged a look that wasn't confidence, it was calculation. Exit routes, consequences. Melissa's phone lowered inch by inch. "This is getting blown out of proportion," she said quickly. "They're contractors. I didn't say they were police." Jerome finally looked at her. "You told them to detain me on property you don't control. That's not a misunderstanding. That's conspiracy." Sirens echoed faintly in the distance, not rushing, not panicked, certain. The compliance officers stepped back instinctively. "We were just doing what we were told," one muttered. 3 marked vehicles entered the garage in smooth formation, state insignia, real uniforms, real posture. Doors opened and officers stepped out with controlled precision. "Everyone freeze where you are," the lead officer commanded. The 2 fake enforcers didn't resist. They couldn't. Cuffs snapped shut. Radios were removed. Jackets peeled away to reveal nothing underneath that carried legal weight. Melissa's face drained of color. "I'm the HOA board chair. This is a private community issue," she said desperately. The officer didn't even look at her at first. "Impersonating enforcement and attempting unlawful detention," he said, nodding to his team. "Add trespass and false reporting." Then he turned to Jerome and straightened. "Director Carter," he said respectfully, "do you want to proceed?" Melissa's knees weakened. "Director." Jerome nodded once. "Proceed," he said. Melissa tried one last time. "He never told anyone who he was. How was I supposed to know?" Jerome looked at her, not angry, not smug, just clear. "You didn't need to know who I was. You just needed to respect what wasn't yours." She was read her rights right there in the garage. Neighbors leaned over railings above, phones out, whispers turning into gasps. The HOA chair, who spoke so loudly in meetings, could barely speak at all. As she was escorted past Jerome's SUV, she stared at the parking space like it had betrayed her. By evening, an emergency HOA notice went out. Melissa Grant was suspended pending investigation. The compliance unit was exposed as a private intimidation service, already under state review. Harbor Point Residences quietly rewrote its bylaws. Jerome parked in his space that night like he always had. No speech, no victory lap, just silence reclaimed. If this story reminded you that real authority doesn't yell, threaten, or borrow power, make sure you like, subscribe, and comment what time it is where you're watching from right now, because the loudest people in the room are rarely the ones in control.